Hello guys, this is Dr. Serdar YILMAZ, Muğla Sıtkı Koçman University, Department of Political Science and International Relations. Today's lecture is about China for the course called Asia Pacific. You have the necessary documents on our university's course management system. As you know that due to coronavirus, we have to continue our education via distance learning system. So today we're going to analyze Japan and her Asia Pacific policy, guys. So let's start by introducing Japan. Japan is a kind of archipelago. It means a chain of many small islands, as you can see in the picture. It is a very mountainous country. As you can see, almost all the Japan is about mountains. So that's why Japan has very little arable land. So it uses terrace farming. This is a terrace farming as an example, guys. And what can I say about Japan? Also, she gets a lot of its food from the sea. So this is another way to be adapted to the geography. There is no natural resources. Maybe there is, but really low amount of natural resources that they have in there. Japan has a very high population density. You can see a kind of comparison between California and Japan. Japan is smaller than California, but has huge population compared to California. It's more than 3 times in terms of population. So this is the population density map of the world. As you can see, these regions have high population density, and this is Japan and Tokyo. There are some, of course, interesting informations about Japan. So this is one interesting information is about Japan, that there are some people, employed people called pushers, who push people onto the train during the rush hours, so that more people can fit in the train. This is capsule hotels, very famous in Japan. Small rooms, of course, intended to provide cheap, basic, and overnight accommodation for the guests who visit Japan. Japan is a homogeneous society. We can say that people all have the same genes, ethnicity, and basic cultures. Of course, we cannot talk about 100% for sure, but generally, Japan is a homogeneous society, and also they still have ethnocentric feelings. This is the emotional attitude that one's own race, nation, or culture is superior to the others. In terms of belief that they have Shintoism, it is about spirits in nature. It is about similar to animism in Africa. But apart from Shintoism, there is Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, and etc. But no matter what happens, Japanese have a true respect for nature. Also, they have a kind of practice of selective borrowing. This is about when a country deliberately takes on only certain aspects of culture or ideas. Mostly come, of course, came from China and Korea. So what is good? China take it or borrow it and apply it, guys. Religion, management style, culture, governmental type, art, science, literature, whatever it is necessary and it is useful, China take it or borrow it. Let me talk about historical legacy of China during Second World War and after Second World War. Of course, as you know, that Japan occupied the whole Southeast Asia countries that you can see in the picture. Although today's subject is about Japan's Asia-Pacific policy, but let's provide some historical informations about Japan as well. So they used to be an expansionist country, as I can say quite easily. That they have motto Asia for the Asians. Also they have another policy that Greater East Asia prosperity sphere since the end of 19th century. During Second World War, Japan have, as I said, expansionist policies. In terms of absorption of the economies of all occupied countries, Japan used this an extraction of resources to fuel the war against the Allies. Japan occupied the Asia Pacific countries, and they extract their natural resources to use their economic wellness. What else? Of course, after the Second World War, things have changed, and Japan surrendered to United States of America. And since the end of Second World War, U.S. strategy is being applied by Japan in this peninsula, guys. What else I can say about that? Japan after Second World War tried to become an important economic actor in the world politics. So that's why they were not indifferent in organizational alliances in Asia Pacific Peninsula, and of course they did not spend a lot of money for their defense structure. Why? Because United States was a kind of guarantee country of the defense of Japan. So that's why they focused on economic development. But of course, because of the legacy of Japan's expansionist policy, the Asia-Pacific countries did not like Japan. For example, this is a newspaper in Indonesia, the anti-Japanese demonstration of 1974, when Japanese Prime Minister, began to visit all the Asia Pacific countries in 1974. So almost all of the Asia Pacific countries were against possible expansionist policy of Japan. Even in 1978, when Vietnam invaded Cambodia, Japan felt a kind of threat from Vietnam. Why? Because they think that this Vietnam invasion of Cambodia threatened Japan's economic interest. So that's why Japan must maintain a kind of dialogue with Vietnam. What did Japan do against Vietnam? They aligned with U.S., ASEAN, and the China camp. So they put a kind of sanctions on Vietnam by halting economic assistance to this country, and they called for Vietnam to withdraw all the troops from Cambodia. As you can see, that after the Second World War, Japan has put the expansionist policy or the legacy aside, guys. What else? When United States of America tried to build ASEAN in Asia-Pacific region, all the ASEAN countries, of course, did not trust Japan, and of course they have a kind of fear of Japan's imperialistic tendencies. But gradually over the years, these fears of Japan's imperialistic tendencies remained, but reduced, and there was a kind of strong economic links between Japan and ASEAN countries, and development programs needed Japan's support and investment, as Japan was a kind of economic giant at that period. And many ASEAN countries now at that period take Japan as an economic model and partner. For example, Malaysia's Look East policy or Laos and Singapore's Learn from Japan policy were good example that ASEAN countries take Japan as economic model. For example, Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir said in 1991 that as we approach the year 2000, it is our hope that Japan will initiate changes in its policies that will effectively bring about an enhanced political, socio-cultural role in not only the Southeast Asia region, but also in the global context. This is major regional economic integrations in the world, and as you can see, Japan is a part of many of the major economic integrations in international relations. Japan signed its first ever free trade agreement with Singapore in 2002, and also they signed economic partnership agreement with these countries in pink. And after Second World War, every single person in the world was talking about Japanese miracle, how Japan became a world power. Of course, it's recently 70 years ago, Japan was the only Asian country universally agreed to have achieved a kind of modernity. How did they do this? This launched a quest to duplicate the accomplishment elsewhere. But, was the miracle and could it be reproduced? This is some questions. And we can ask another question that let's begin by asking what's modern about modern Japan? Or is it a matter of local old ways versus global new ways? When we analyze Japan's economic miracle, guys, especially between 1945 and 1955, as you know that the U.S. General Douglas MacArthur pushed new constitutions in Japan, which is known as MacArthur constitutions. That, eliminate military influence in government. Land reform eliminates large landowners, makes Japan's farmer middle class. Emperor become largely ceremonial, so no longer considered divine. U.S. troops and bases stationed in Japan. This is Douglas MacArthur with the Japanese Empire Hirohito, who argued Japanese people to cooperate with occupation. Continue to analyze Japan's economic miracle. Japan's economic growth is highest in the world during 1950s and 1960s. By 1970s, Japan has third largest economy in the world, becomes the model for other East Asian economies. That includes even China, fulfills the U.S. goal of a strong counterweight to communist influence in East Asia. That was another policy of United States to eradicate communism in Asia Pacific region, guys. So large financial cliques that were broken up after the World War II. Famous examples, as you can see, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Suzuki, and etc., guys. Some elements of Japanese miracles. This is a partnership between government and private corporations. Slow down population growth. They free up capital to invest. Economy is based initially on exports and eventually turns to consumer goods for domestic market. Government and companies agreed to focus on certain areas of industry, electronics, for example, automobiles, other vehicles, cameras, shipbuildings, and etc. You can add more on this area, guys. So emphasis on quality through team approach, job security for those in good corporations. So in terms of automation, Japan became first major users of industrial robots in manufacturing in this area. So these were first developed in Connecticut in United States of America. For example, Honda, this is the picture that shows the Honda's first robots, guys. In terms of miniaturization, Japanese take new American technology like transistors and can manufacture more cheaply because of the miniaturization policy. And of course, gradually over the years, there was a kind of slowdown in Japanese economic, especially in 1990s. There was a kind of problems of inflation, high oil policies, and crony capitalism. Crony capitalism, I put Turkish on the right and English on the left. Crony capitalism, a description of capitalist society, is being based on the close relationships between businessmen and state, instead of success being determined by a free market and the rule of law. The success of a business is dependent on the favoritism that is shown it to by a ruling government in the form of tax breaks, government grants, or other incentive. You can see the Turkish on the right. Crony kapitalizm is called ahbap çavuş kapitalizmi, yandaş kapitalizmi ya da eş dost kapitalizmi. Bir iktisadi teşebbüsün başarısının iş adamlarıyla hükümet arasındaki yakın ilişkilere bağlı olduğu, iş adamlarının işlerini siyasal iktidar ve bürokratlarla olan ilişkilerine dayanarak yürüttüğü sistemi anlatan terimdir. So as you can see that between Japanese economic slowdown and crony capitalism, there is a huge link, guys. After Second World War, because of the economic development of China, some other ASEAN and Asia Pacific countries took Japan as an example. South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan follow Japan's formula for success. Their economies also grow rapidly. Today, there are other two countries, Malaysia, Thailand, are following similar routes to development. Vietnam also is following China's mix of capitalism and communism, also taking some example from Japan as well. Indonesia is a mix of tiger-style development along with selling of its natural resources, for example, forests. In terms of Japan's Asia-Pacific policy, guys, in response to the rise of China and India, and of course declining US influence in especially Asia-Pacific region, Japan has prescribed the need for new security partnership and its expansion of Tokyo's role in shaping the destiny of Asia-Pacific. And as a result, Japan has shifted its geostrategic focus from the Asia Pacific to the Indo-Pacific. As you can see that I have put the details in here also. Now I'm going to talk about Japan's Asia Pacific policy, or with the new name, Japan's Indo-Pacific policy. The Indo-Pacific has evolved as a geostrategic construct to accommodate the challenges associated with a regional powers shift. Japan has embraced the concept in her own bid for regional leadership. In order to promote an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative, the Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, has for years pushed his vision of free and open Indo-Pacific. Free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. As you can see here, clearly outlined that, especially in 2016, to promote connectivity, free trade, and infrastructures across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. As you can see, that Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific policy is a kind of alternative policy to Chinese one belt, one road policy, guys. So Shinzo Abe's pivot to Asia. So Japan is always considered as a kind of pivot to Asia. The free and open Indo-Pacific policy evolved as a main pillar of Japan's strategy to contain China's military and economic power in Asia Pacific, guys. Amidst or similar to the competition over the reshaping of Asian geopolitical order, Shinzo Abe has embraced the Barack Obama's administration's policy pivot to Asia. He pledged a kind of strong Japan. The Shinzo Abe, since 2013, strengthened the U.S.-Japan alliance and established new security partnership together with the United States of America. On one hand, the Indo-Pacific has only recently captured the imagination of military planners and academics. Now some scientists start to study these Japan's new policy, especially against the Chinese One Belt One Road project. What else I can say about that? Shinzo Abe, for example, in 2000, the middle of 2000, he said that a confluence of the two seas. So arguing for a regional order based on values of democracy, human rights, and undistributed access to the region's maritime commons. So calling for a value-orientated foreign policy, this speech built on the Arc of Freedom of Prosperity initiative introduced by Shinzo Abe administration in the middle of 2000s. Shinzo Abe reviewed the Indo-Pacific upon his came back as prime minister in 2012. In promoting Asia's democratic security diamond, he criticized China's assertive behavior in the South China Sea as an attempt to turn these maritime commons into a lake Beijing. As you know perfectly that China is trying to have a kind of say in Asia, South China Sea. So Japan is against this policy of China. To prevent this from happening, Shinzo Abe called for a robust strategic partnership between the US, Australia, India, and Japan. So Japan has since worked hard to initiate the quadrilateral security dialogue to consolidate Japan's military links with those three countries, namely Australia, USA, and India. This partnership have both a geostrategic and geoeconomic dimensions. Prior to the policy in 2017, Japan had signed agreements on deterrence technology transfer with Australia in 2014 and with India in 2015. At the same time, Japan provided defense technology and training to the Philippines and Vietnam, lifting its long-standing ban on arms export in 2014. In addition to this, Shinzo Abe has legalized Japan's participation in collective self-defense operations and swiftly moved to entangle his country in securing the maritime order in South China Sea. To this end, Japan now not only supports the US Navy's freedom of navigation operations, but also conducts a joint military exercise in Asia-Pacific region. Japan also organizes port calls for Japan's maritime self-defense forces and supplies patrol vessels and surveillance planes to ASEAN members states to counter China's assertive behavior in this water, especially in South China Sea. However, the Trump administration's immediate withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we will see in other weeks, has forced policymakers in Japan to decouple their tragedy their trade strategy from the US. The Japan-India relationship constitutes a kind of cornerstone of what some observers have termed Japan's grand strategy called free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. As you can see, that there is a huge rivalry between Japan and China in Asia-Pacific region. China is being a kind of ally with Pakistan, and Japan is being a close ally with India. So in competition with China's One Belt, One Road project, Japan has pledged support for a large-scale infrastructure projects, including the construction of high-speed railway tracks and various other projects. Shinzo Abe has relied on India's long-established connections on the African continent to effectively expand the geographical scope of the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. Of course, together with the close step of the Prime Minister of India, Modi, Shinzo Abe announced the establishment of Asia-Africa Growth Corridor as a platform to provide quality infrastructure and capacity building in especially Africa. So it is that's why no coincidence that Shinzo Abe chose the 2016 Tokyo International Conference on African Development in August 2016 in Nairobi to announce Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy vision. So to position itself in the competition with China's One Belt, One Road project, Japan has put the emphasis on quality infrastructures projects. It is really tough because far behind China's 4 trillion budget, which is between 4 and 8 trillion budgets, one belt, one road projects. Japan has pledged $110 billion through the Asian Development Bank to develop quality projects. So Shinzo Abe has included the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy as a key element in Japan's official development strategy in Asia-Pacific region. Moreover, Tokyo will also need to work harder to substantiate the Pacific in its free and open Indo-Pacific strategy. In the latest Pacific Islands leaders meeting in May, sponsored by, of course, Tokyo, Shinzo Abe didn't miss the opportunity to emphasize Japan's own strategic concerns about North Korea and China. So it, of course, yet failed to sufficiently address issues such as ocean governance, ocean governance and climate change. To be successful in these regions, Shinzo Abe must be clear that the Indo-Pacific is more than an instrument of regional hegemonic competition with China. If Shinzo Abe fails to do so, Japan's value-oriented diplomacy will likely reinforce civilizational geopolitics and create more cause for conflict than, unfortunately, peace and security. So thank you very much for listening to me, guys. I hope it is useful for you, and look after yourself. See you next week.